Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, with this 2016 presidential election cycle and the bizarre ascendancy of the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian, Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller, we see that there have been a lot of changes that occurred in the public forum for the American system of polity. Take, for example, how during Iowa, the New York Bulgarian decided to duck out of a nationally televised presidential candidate debate in order to avoid having to deal with harsh questions from Fox News pundit Megyn Kelly. It was something that was bizarre, puzzling, and head-scratching at the time, but we see that what he was attempting to do was to create a special media spectacle in order to harm his rivals in the gutless opposition party, or GOP, while amassing airtime and goodwill unto himself. Of course, the manner in which he did so was to claim that he was going to have a bigly fundraiser in honor of the troops. That was his goal, to make himself appear as though he was better than he really is while harming his rivals. To make matters worse, after assuming this position unto himself and going out in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, Trump proclaimed that he had raised an inordinate amount of money for the troops. However, that turned out not to be the case, and this story is continuing to plague him. One of the things that we have oft-times warned about on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence The Wright Flyer is just how disingenuous the Trumpster is. The mafioso quafioso will say and do anything that will inflate his public image and stroke his considerable ego, irrespective of the harm that it might cause to the greater movement of conservatism in the arena of American politics, and whether it would divide in hopeless fashion the base of the Republican Party. He has managed to accomplish that goal, and it's all through disingenuous ways of lying, spreading deceitful things, going to base proverbial mudslinging, ad hominem attacks, and all sorts of other unsavory characteristics. It makes you wonder what has happened to decency. Now, that is not an expression of desire for the cancerous doctrine of political correctness. On the contrary, like the cancerous doctrine of political correctness, Donald Trump's Bulgarian tactics are designed to destroy our traditional institution of decorum. Now, I call it a traditional institution because it is a code. It's an unwritten rule of civility. We used to be able to have civil discourse in the United States. In fact, it's a quintessential pillar of how our representative Republican form of government came into being. The entire Great Compromise that created the bicameral houses of the legislative branch of government, or the people's branch of government, was created through such civil discourse. When you look upon the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, you see the complete embodiment of this type of civility. That is an integral part of who we are, both as a nation and as a people. Such civility and such great achievements could not be accomplished using the style, strategy, and tactic of Donald Trump. Of course, that is something we will all have to come to terms with, because it is drastically and fundamentally changing the way that our electoral system works in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. A prime example of where the code of civility is really necessary is particularly with respect to the judiciary. You respect the office because it is such an important pillar of society. The entire purpose of the judiciary is to basically create an avenue or forum by which we can resolve conflicts in a peaceful manner. These legal disputes in medieval times would have been decided on a battlefield. That's why the baronage was constantly fighting amongst itself, erecting castles all throughout Old England to ensure that their disputes and grievances could be addressed on what they considered a field of honor. However, in a more modern civilized society, like that envisioned by our founding fathers over 230 years ago, such field of honor should be in a courtroom. That is where it is decided to ensure that the stability and sanctity of society is preserved. You see, everything ties around this idea of sacred honor, and that is why people, when they are swearing before a court of law in order to testify, swear on a Bible. It is to their faith, to their sacred honor. It is a statement that they are to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We would expect similar types of things from those who are vying for the highest office in the land, to tell the truth and to be honest to the American people, so that the American people, who are the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, can make an educated determination as to whom they feel is best qualified to wield the reins of political power in our republic. That is why our system is designed to be the way it is. Sure, you will never have pure civility in an electoral process due to the adversarial nature that is a quintessential part of the primary process and later the general election. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean that the candidate should go out of their way to be as vulgar, crass, brash, and bombastic as possible, because that doesn't do the voters any service. You see, if we are unable to make the determination based on logic, reason, and facts, then we are doomed to have a slew of progressively worse candidates. Indeed, that's the very problem that is afflicting the United States of America as I speak into this microphone. We here at Radio Aviation Excellence understand that the Constitution is the key, and the Constitution itself was created out of the very notion of civil discourse. Again, it's something that Donald Trump does not consider. He doesn't understand it, and this is due, thanks in no small part, to the fact that he made statements back in 2012 that he never once fully read the Constitution, as, by his own admission, he found no value in it. Well, that's troubling. It should be sounding alarm bells and sending up red flags for decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens all throughout this land. It shows that he is incompetent when it comes to understanding the proper scope and application of government. If he is unable to rule by restraint, then due to the nature of the executive office that he seeks, which has been expanded beyond its proper constitutional applications, the character of the individual seeking the office becomes all the more important. For instance, those who seek the office must be able to have self-restraint, due to the awesome power that is afforded to them, which they should have never had by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution. This is the stark reality that faces us both as a nation and as a people, and it is why the fact that Donald Trump is consistently inconsistent, incapable of telling the truth, and continues to attack his former rivals even after they have suspended their campaign for the White House is so disconcerting. It's not that we are attempting to complain, or to put it in the phrase of the Lion Trumpidians in their truest, most vulgar form, that we are butthurt about this. Rather, it's that we care about the country. We care about the posterity of this land. It is our duty, obligation, and above all, responsibility to ensure that the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born, can enjoy and exercise their fundamental and inalienable rights in an even greater fashion than we were able to enjoy and exercise them. That, too, is something that we were tasked with by our founding fathers over 230 years ago. To ignore this is to ignore reality. It is to go beyond the proper scope and application of our electoral process, and it is a direct slap in the face of our forefathers who gave so much so that we might live free. In other words, we have to be true to the history of the United States. We must be true to the original composition of our shared Constitution. Again, this is why, on a previous episode of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I had mentioned the establishment of the constitutional compositionist movement. The entire purpose and driving force of this movement is to ensure that civility is restored to our electoral process, but beyond that, also to ensure that we have some way of reining in out-of-control candidates who have clearly shown that they are both incompetent and incapable of standing up for our fundamental and inalienable rights. So back to this idea that Trump was raising money for the troops, and he was not really very true about it. He had bragged in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that he had donated $1 million himself. However, as time went on, it turned out that was not the case. His own top personnel had attempted to hide this fact, refusing to state on the importance of it and saying that it was none of the public's business. Well, when the candidate flaps his gums in the manner in which Donald Trump had flapped his own, it makes it the public's business, particularly when it is our troops who have been in the crosshairs of such a deceitful statement. This whole idea that there was a lot of money, over $6 million, and that turned out not to be the case, it shows that he is unwilling or incapable of telling the truth. Now, Trump came back and essentially attacked the mainstream media for pushing him on this, and it came up to a deadline that was forced upon him by the media. Remember that this original pledge that he made was made all the way back in February. On May 24th, he was forced to admit that he hadn't, and he cut the check, as he said he had done back in February. Folks, you really cannot make this sort of stuff up. It is a true part of the nature and character, or lack thereof, of the presumptive nominee for the gutless opposition party, or GOP. This is a fact that will be used and utilized against him by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media as they work in tandem to push Hillary Clinton. The reason being is they are dyed-in-the-wool Fabian socialists themselves and will stop at nothing to propagate the Fabian socialist agenda. It is, of course, diametrically opposed to the will, hopes, dreams, and aspirations of the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people. Nevertheless, this has been their game plan for a long time. And it raises that nagging question as to whether Trump had thrown his quaff into the ring back in July of 2015 in order to pave an easy path to the White House for the shill known as Madam Clinton. In truth, Trump should not be targeting his ire at the reporters who are doing their job, albeit way too late, but instead at himself, for making claims that he knew weren't true. But that has never been a problem with Donald Trump. He's always thought that he was a cut above of everything else, and that the rules that apply to average, ordinary citizens, again, the ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic, he thinks that he is a cut above, that nothing applies to him, that he is free from it all. Now, how is that any different than Madam Clinton, who, with her email gate scandal, considered herself to be a cut above every other official within the federal government? The fact of the matter is there is no difference between them. There is no discernible distinguishment between the mafioso quafioso and the screamin' thunder thigh liar. They're both wholly incompetent and disqualified from wielding the reins of political power in this country. That is the stark reality that we, as popular sovereigns, must come to. Nevertheless, we see that the Republican Party is gearing up to help the once so-called self-funding candidate raise as much money as possible for his campaign, because he has come out and claimed that his campaign is broke. Yet this also brings up the question as to why he has dismantled the logistical sorts of frameworks that he created in the various primary and caucus states he won after winning. He essentially went through and fired all of his staff and personnel, meaning that the battle will be an uphill battle from the beginning. I don't think that this was done out of sheer incompetence. Again, I think this was done on purpose because he has been essentially a lifelong friend of the Clintons. Therefore, that nagging question about whether he officially entered the fray to help pave the path to an easy victory for the Clintonistas is prominent on my mind. The circumstantial evidence clearly seems to indicate that that's exactly what has been happening, which would also explain why he has reserved his most venomous vitriol for his fellow Republicans. It's absolutely asinine to think that he would use such weapons against his rivals and then play a very tepid game with respect to the Fabian Socialists in the Democrat Party unless, of course, he himself is a Fabian Socialist. That's certainly what his past conduct, statements, and candor was all about. It's what he had always done in the past, and it should clearly be sounding alarm bells for anyone who claims to be a constitutional conservative in the very least. Yet we see that the Lion Trump-vidians don't care. They say that what was said in the past doesn't matter. What matters is that he's had a change of heart, or they go down with that ridiculous line that Ronald Reagan had been a lifelong Democrat as well. Except that the mainstay difference between Reagan and Trump is that by the time Reagan vied for the highest office in the land, he had been a conservative governor within the Republican Party and had 18 years under his belt. I don't believe that there's even 18 milliseconds of conservative thought under Donald Trump's belt. I don't think he's ever once considered himself a conservative. I don't think that he considers conservative principles an answer to the great problems that currently face this nation. No, instead, Donald Trump shows that, as always, he is about himself. He has always been about himself. That is how he was able to amass the fortune that he brags about all the time, but perhaps that fortune's not as great as he stated. Just as he said that he had raised a great amount of money for the veterans, that turned out not to be true. What is to prevent us from thinking that he's not as wealthy as he says he is? Of course, Richard Milhouse Nixon proved to be more open and honest with the American electorate than Donald Trump has. Trump has made the rather laughable claim that he cannot release his tax returns because he is under audit. He then makes up some excuse that all of his rich friends, the various ones who made donations to these 41 veterans groups that he mentioned, were never audited. And then Corey Lewandowski, the woman-hitting campaign manager for the Trump camp, came out and stated that it was their fault. It was his rich friend's fault. There's a pattern here, a truly alarming pattern with respect to the Donaldoff that should also give everyone a moment of pause. Just like the current Chiquita-in-Chief who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, nothing is ever Donald Trump's fault. It is always someone else's fault. He can't be to blame. Everyone else is lying. Except that there's one common denominator here with all of these stories of seedy deceit, and that is Donald Trump himself. There is no way to escape this. There is no way to sweep that under the rug or sugarcoat it. Donald Trump continues down a path of lies and deceit, and we need someone who is an honorable soul in order to have a virtuous republic. But apparently that has been lost in the fray. The Fabian socialists must be congratulating themselves and patting themselves on the back over winning this grave victory over our traditional idea of sacred honor and a virtuous republic. Each and every one of us should be frothing at the mouth angry about this, because what it shows is they are trying to take civil discourse, civility, and our power away from us. Of course, that has been the goal of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and the various historical revisionists that have infiltrated our institutions of higher education from coast to coast and border to border for generations now. They have accomplished great things in their own mind by perverting and bastardizing our system. It is this very corruption that irritates the American electorate. That is what has brought about the blind fury and rage that has become the hallmark of the 2016 presidential election cycle. It is clear as day for anyone to see who looks upon this in an objective fashion. The problem is that the Lion Trumpidians are turning to Trump as the man to clean up the corruption when he has been the man through his own admission and donations that has enabled this sort of troubling conduct to occur within the arena of American politics. The hypocrisy of it all would be staggering, except we must recall that blind emotionalism allows people to be easily manipulated. They shut down their mental faculties and don't consider the truth. And as a result, as they attempt to modify their own political beliefs and behavior to fit that of this champion and messianic figure that they are throwing their weight behind, it becomes all the more difficult to dislodge them of their erroneous conclusions. The reason being is they are projecting their own self-identity and self-worth upon the mafioso quafioso. That's a very dangerous thing to have happen, because when he fails them, as he ultimately will, they will be left behind realizing that they are duped. Then the question becomes whether their ego, which has been severely harmed by the quaff waffler, will allow them to admit their mistake. Of course not. For the vast majority of them, by their own behavior already, they will turn to a favorite scapegoat that has been blamed for the failings of weak Republican candidates in election cycle after election cycle. Their favorite scapegoat is the same favorite scapegoat of the current President Peel and Squeal, Barack Hussein Obama, whenever his agenda gets thwarted, or whenever he doesn't get exactly what he wants or unintended consequences happen. It would be true constitutional conservatives. They view us as bitter clingers. Remember that Obama said that those who adhere to a true, principled constitutional position are those who are bitter clingers to their guns and Bibles. He has made it clear that he has contempt for them. But do not mistake that Donald Trump holds the same contempt. Remember that when he was speaking in front of an audience in Fresno, California, he claimed that he wouldn't call Ted Cruz Lion Ted anymore, that he was going to retire that. Except that the disingenuous fashion in which he did it showed that he wanted to say it again. He was feeding off of the raw emotionalism of the twisted, diabolical audience standing before him. He said, Lion Ted, hold that Bible up high and then put it down and lie. That shows the same kind of contempt that Barack Hussein Obama holds for those who are faithful, righteous American citizens, attacking the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It is utterly disgusting to see that this is the type of charade that has been foisted upon us, yet it is undeniable that that is what is unfurling before our very eyes and has become a hallmark of this 2016 presidential election cycle. On top of this, we have the betrayal of the so-called conservative punditry and commensurate with people like Laura Ingraham, Michael Savage, Rush Limbaugh, and Matt Drudge, who are purposefully falsifying the cases against Trump, who are trying to defend Trump and brush it aside, basically taking the concerns of true conservatives and saying that they don't matter. Why is that the case? Why do we have to fall on bended knee and accept this? Folks, what we see is that Trump has used a combination not only of the tactics laid out by Saul Alinsky in his so-called magnus opus of rules for radicals, but he's attached it to the Cloward Piven principle as well. He is attempting to overwhelm us, to make us feel as though we should be disillusioned, demoralized, and defeated. There's this whole narrative that has been foisted upon us by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media in the hopes of convincing us that we are defeated, that there is no chance for us, that we should just acquiesce to this slew of ever-worsening candidates in each preceding electoral process. All of the lies and deceit have pushed us into the current untenable position that we face. Again, it's not to turn to one who has empowered this and allowed this to occur through his various fundings of all of those things that we find deceitful and unacceptable. Rather, we have to turn back to the original key that has been with us ever since the foundation of our country over 230 years ago. We've mentioned on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, going back to our first episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, that the key has been with us since the inception of the country, and that key is none other than the Constitution of the United States. The problem is that neither of the presumptive nominees for the two mainstay parties believe in the Constitution. Neither one of them would restrain themselves to the proper scope and application of government as outlined and mandated by the clear and concise language contained within its four corners. That is a major problem that will not be easily overcome. This explains why the hashtag #NeverTrump movement has gained the sort of momentum that it has. Yet, the browbeating and the bullying, pushing for a tyranny of false unity, will continue. They will try and argue that Hillary is so much worse than Trump. But how can that be when Trump was her top donor for so many years? They just say, hush it, or I don't care, or that's in the past. They do not provide us with a reasonable, fact-based, logical explanation to defend their position, to convince us that Trump is worthy of our vote. They think that Trump is merely entitled to it because he's now the presumptive nominee. Well, I'm sorry, that's not the way that our representative Republican form of government operates. Votes still have to be earned. I'm still a sovereign individual. I am still someone who is part of the societal fabric of the United States, and that means my vote has to be earned. If the candidate is incapable of earning my vote, that is on the candidate. It is not on me. Yet they try and do the inverse of that. They try and say that the exact and polar opposite is the truth, and that we should just bow down and acquiesce to their overwhelming Cloward Piven and Saul Alinsky style of slander, deceit, lies, and vulgarianism. But why should we accept vulgarity as a quintessential part of our electoral system and our electoral process? Historically speaking, that has never been the case in the United States, but we see now that as the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media likes to hype and remind us, this is supposedly the election cycle in which conventional wisdom is cast by the wayside. So if we take that logic to its inexorable conclusion, it would be that the conventional logic and wisdom with respect to coalescing behind the presumptive nominee must also be cast by the wayside in this electoral cycle. Otherwise, they're just picking and choosing which points conventional wisdom are cast aside. Of course, that is a tried and true tactic of the Fabian socialist-controlled mainstream media, but it is one that we must wholeheartedly reject. The idea of deceit must be defeated. The idea that our system of polity can be plundered in this diabolical manner in which it has been must also be defeated. Again, the key is within the Constitution, and those who can really save the country are none other than we, the people. This is why we must proclaim our identity as constitutional compositionists. It's why we must reach out to one another to stand shoulder to shoulder and let our hearts grow richer as we stand in fierce and truly righteous opposition to those forces, irrespective of what political party they belong to, who pose a direct and dire threat to our cherished United States Constitution and our representative Republican form of government. This is exactly what our founding fathers would have expected of us, and it is something that we must not abandon nor turn our backs on. We will never tell you how to exercise your fundamental and inalienable right to vote. All we ask is that you take a step back and attempt to look at this in a logical fashion, with the constitutional framework, which is the only applicable litmus test to be applied when determining whether or not a candidate is qualified to wield the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Alafundit penned an article with the news site hotair.com in which he states that Donald Trump, the presumptive gutless opposition party nominee, has made vows to wealthy Republican donors that he will not attempt to unseat the Rhino establishment leadership of either Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan. Now, this raises a significant question with respect to the line that has been foisted on us by the Lion Trumpidians. Remember that they tried to say all along that Cruz could not be trusted because he was owned by his rich donors, and that one of the great things that Trump was doing was that he couldn't be bought because he was self-funding. Now, I know that we've mentioned on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that this was a bunch of bunk, that Trump was already turning to a partner in George Soros's finance group, and who is also a partner at Goldman Sachs, to now back his campaign. He has essentially come forth now and said that his campaign is broke, and is seeking to have funding. And to do so, he is showing strict alliance to the wealthy donors and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. This is something that we have been trying to warn about for 10 months straight now, folks. Donald J. Trump is not who he claims to be. His allegiance is not to conservatism. And remember that his own fixer-upper there, Paul Manafort, had stated in a previous meeting with the so-called detente leadership of the party that Donald Trump was merely putting on an act when he was making those stump speeches in front of his most ardent acolytes, the Lion Trumpidians. So again, we see that this kabuki theater that is all about a mask of deception continues. We see that everything that was promised on the campaign trail was just a lie. Yet somehow, this New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian is not a politician? That's clearly not the case, and of course we've warned about that on past episodes as well. Donald Trump is, and has always been, a politician. He became a politician the moment he started greasing the palm of some of those most nefarious types of detentists who were diametrically opposed to the conservative movement. Again, this would explain why Trump has gone in front of the cameras for the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and proclaimed that he does not want full party unity, that he doesn't need full party unity, and that it is the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. Folks, that is a direct shot across the bow at conservatives, telling us to go pound sand, telling us that our voice does not matter. This is the worst form of pandering that I have seen in my relatively brief time on this earth. Nevertheless, it is clear in what Trump is trying to do. He is trying to consolidate behind those nefarious forces that more closely align to his own Fabian socialist views that he has held for the vast majority of his adult life. Again, this is why the past of a candidate matters, and it is why the only litmus test that is applicable when determining whether or not a candidate is qualified to wield the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours is none other than the United States Constitution. This is the stark reality that we have to come to terms with. There can be no question that his loyalty is to the détente wing, the very détente wing that spread the sort of blind rage and fury that allowed the disillusioned conservatives to become so enamored with the tune played by the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives, none other than the New York vulgarian Donald Trump, or is that John Barron, or is that John Miller himself. But this is so tragic in scope because the great comedy of errors that is playing out on the arena of American politics right now is that a great many people have been duped. And when we say that, we get all sorts of attacks saying that we don't understand what we're talking about, that we clearly don't know how to read the political tea leaves. Well, poppycock, because when you look at what he is doing and the people that he is aligning himself with and the sort of support that he has received from the most vulgar of the détente wing, you see that this was a perfectly orchestrated coup in order to once again advance the agenda of the détente wing of the gutless opposition party. They both played in this game of fraud and the inducement to make people close their eyes and turn their hearts away from truth and reality in order to become willfully deceived by the braggadocio and brash New York real estate tycoon. But how is he going to solve the problems that are currently facing the country? Again, he's made all of these shallow, hollow, empty, and meaningless platitudes and never once expounded upon how he would carry them out. You see, therein lies the problem. If Trump does not have a working knowledge of our Constitution, which, by his own admission in that 2012 interview I mentioned in the opening segment of today's program, then he is not going to know how to rule in a proper format. He is not going to restrain himself. He will work towards his twisted machinations and continue to attack in merciless fashion anyone who raises any significant questions with respect to his validity as a candidate. We cannot simply close our eyes to this. This is why you see that the hashtag #NeverTrump movement has gained the sort of steam and momentum that it has. But as we draw closer to those dark clouds looming over the distant horizon, which is the general election slated for this November, we have to recall that they are going to amp up their pressure. They are going to sling the proverbial mud at an ever greater rate at us, hoping to tear us apart, hoping to divide and conquer us, all with the specter of Hillary Clinton. Again, that's not good enough. It's not good enough to see that this man who went after a good and decent man like that of Texas Senator Ted Cruz should deserve our vote. He has done nothing to reach out to us. He has done everything in his power to show us that we are not welcome nor wanted within our own party. But that is a step too far. It is a bridge too far. It shows that he is disconnected from reality, and that will not serve the Republican Party well in this looming general election. Why is it that Trump is refusing to stay steadfast to his pledge to be self-funding? Well, like everything else about him, it was a carefully crafted branding image. You have to recall that Donald J. Trump has built his entire wealth off of creating a brand image. It's not based in reality, it's not based on who he really is, it's based upon his twisted goals and machinations, irrespective of the harm that they might cause to the general public or the marks in his con game. That is why he is a confidence man. He is attempting to gain the confidence of the Republican voters in order to betray them when it comes to the most critical time. Again, this is the warning that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been making for well over 10 months now. We have seen this disaster of a train wreck approaching the Republican Party, and we tried to use reason and logic to reach out to those who are blinded by raw emotionalism. Now it is time that we continue to stay steadfast to the pledges we made, because unlike the Lion Trumpidians, we have not sold our principles. We have not turned our back on the true, ultimate, supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, is the United States Constitution. This is the problem that we have. When a person claims that he has no loyalty to the Constitution, when he goes out in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and demands that his followers and supporters swear an oath of allegiance to him, it goes against all that is acceptable within a representative Republican form of government and an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. These are the simple facts and realities that stare us square in the face. He will be a disaster in the general election, and even if by some cruel twist of fate he does manage to win the general election, we will not end our opposition to him then either, because our loyalty is not to a particular specific political party, nor is it to a specific or particular candidate. Our loyalty is to the Constitution. Remember that George Washington warned in his farewell address that a great tyranny could be created by blind loyalty and factionalization. He said that it would pit American citizen against American citizen, and they would lose the greater foresight of the Constitution itself. That all-important, all-encompassing supreme law of the land would become cast to the wayside and subservient to the wills and desires of the factions and any sort of domineering leader or despot that might try to take the reins of power of the party. And we have seen exactly that unfurl before our very eyes in this 2016 presidential election cycle. Just look at the fact that he is saying that it is the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. What sort of value is that? We understand that in the state of New York there is such a thing as the Conservative Party because the Republican Party has strayed so far away from the natural law tenets that underpin the Constitution and from the fundamental tenets that are contained within the clear and concise language within its four corners. That speaks more about this danger of factionalization that Washington, the father of our country, warned about as he was leaving the presidency. We have to be cognizant of these issues and aware of the fact that this sort of pandering should really not have any place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. This is why we say it is so important to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution and thereby also your fundamental and inalienable rights. Because when someone like Trump repeatedly utters the phrase that everything is up for negotiation, that includes our fundamental and inalienable rights as well as our constitutional form of government. We can ill afford to adopt that right now, particularly when you consider that the United States of America is in the midst of an identity crisis coupled with a slew of constitutional crises foisted upon the true body politique of the United States by this disastrous Barack Hussein Obama regime. Again, this is why my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, my first air marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, and yours truly have warned frequently and fervently that Trump is not to be trusted. It is because he is pushing this factionalization. He is driving a wedge in between the base of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, in the hopes of hopelessly dividing us come time for the general election. It also raises the question as to why he would be pandering to Bernie Sanders supporters when he says that he doesn't need full party unity. Why would we wish to taint, corrupt, and pervert the body politique and message of the Republican Party? Unless, of course, he is still a dyed-in-the-wool Fabian socialist who is attempting to infiltrate the Republican Party and to dilute conservatism, to fundamentally redefine it so that it is pushed further astray from the Constitution, thereby becoming just as corrupt as the Democrat Party, so that they become titular sides or faces of the same coin. Now, how does that serve the American people? How does that serve the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty? The direct, most honest answer is it does not serve their best interests. That this election cycle has proven that conservatism has been attacked by all sides and all fronts at the head of the party and at the top of the electoral process. In other words, there is no true constitutional conservative vying for the highest office in the land right now. That is wholly unacceptable, particularly when we look at the fact that this was our election cycle to win. Instead of putting up a true principled constitutionalist who would return this country closer to the true application of the Constitution and strict adherence to the principles contained within its four corners, we put up a charlatan who has never once been a conservative throughout his life. How is this going to play out in the end? Well, folks, I have a feeling that it will not play out well, that we will not get the results that the disillusioned conservatives that have fallen prey to the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives believe. They think because they have projected their own self-image, self-value, and self-worth onto him, that he will accomplish that which cannot be accomplished. Again, this is the danger of seeking a messianic figure to save this country, when, in fact, if you want to find the saviors for the country, you need but look in a mirror. The way that our representative republic was designed, and the reason that it is the longest standing, uninterrupted republic based on the longest lasting constitution in the scope of the course of human conditions and events, it's because it is we the people that are charged and endowed with the authority, and we the people alone who are endowed with such authority to save the country. The greatest argument against a Trump presidency and nomination is that he claims that he and he alone can save the country, that we must all turn to him because only he has the answers. If he is the one who holds and wields the sole authority to save this country, by that very amount of power he would be able to destroy the country without question. That is a dangerous position to place ourselves into, because it is acknowledging the supreme authority of the federal government, which is not the way that the Constitution was designed, nor is it the way that it was written. Again, we must return to a modicum of sanity in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, to return to that which is most important, that we the people, the popular sovereigns of this representative republic, are the ones that need to be empowered to put it back onto the path to prosperity. We need someone like Calvin Coolidge to shake us back into reality, to clean up the corruption that has basically crept into the party, thereby ensuring that the government and the various political parties are acting in direct diametric opposition to the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty. We had a Calvin Coolidge-type candidate vying for the highest office in the land in Texas Senator Ted Cruz. This is not me being butthurt bringing this up to use the rash and vulgar terms of the Lion Branch Trumpidians. Rather, this is me merely explaining the way I see things. We had that opportunity, but because of the deceitful Don in conjunction with the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and the deceptive mannerisms of the gutless opposition party's detente wing, we find ourselves in this unholy, unacceptable alliance, which is again threatening the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing republic. There is no way around that, folks. There is no way to sugarcoat that, and the lies will only continue. Donald Trump is consistent in only one way, in that he is consistently inconsistent. What that clearly demonstrates to me is that he is not serious about who he is, that this is all a facade, and the fact that his own staff and personnel have mentioned this, over and over again is enough to turn my stomach. Again, I'm reminded of how that one staffer for the Trump train told the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that it is a laughable proposition to consider that words have meanings. Then, when Trump himself goes out onto the Fox News channel, which has essentially become a super PAC for him, and states that everything that he said so far in the primary process are mere suggestions, that leaves me with no solid, secure feeling that he would advance the cause of conservatism at all. Mere suggestions? That sounds exactly like the sort of diabolical and twisted language that would be foisted upon us by Madam Clinton. Again, it raises the question of how either one of these two presumptive nominees for the two mainstay political parties in the United States are the lesser of two evils. There is no lesser of two evils, and even if there is, they are akin to a cancer on the body politic of the United States of America, both which will surely slowly kill us if they are not opposed. That's the problem. We have been so swept up in a cult of personality that we no longer see what is truly vital and important to our representative Republican form of government. We see that there are those nefarious forces who will do anything and everything within their power to tear this country apart at the seams. Again, that is why I think that Donald Trump officially threw his quaff into the ring back in July of 2015. He has been working to ensure that either the detente wing of the gutless opposition party maintains its stranglehold on the reins of political power in our country, or that his good buddy and fellow Fabian socialist Hillary Rotten Clinton is able to secure an easy path to victory. There is no commitment to conservatism. There is no commitment to anything. The only thing that has been bizarre is to see how many frauds and liars there have been in the ranks of the so-called conservative movement. People like Sean Hannity, who claimed, rather laughably, that all throughout this campaign season he was objective. He tries to defend his groveling at the feet of the mafioso quafioso. Again, this is the sort of behavior one expects from the Democrat Party. That's the problem. We do not have a true constitutional conservative Republican running. And again, this is why my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have proposed the creation of an external force to exert influence over the entire political spectrum. The reason I say this is that when you consider that there are so many special interest lobbyist organizations out there, it's rather striking that when we face constitutional crisis after constitutional crisis, that there is no lobbying organization on behalf of the Constitution. Yes, there are various unaffiliated organizations, but we need a truly unified organization that is dedicated to the Constitution and to the Constitution alone. Something that cannot be corrupted because it itself is adhering to the natural law principles and tenets that underpin this entire representative Republican form of government of ours. That's exactly what the constitutional compositionist movement is all about. It is dedicated to ensuring that the Constitution is adhered to, and that we will be able to exert influence over all of the currently existing political parties, and indeed any other political party that might arise out of this fiasco and debacle that has been known as the 2016 election cycle. You see, this is the very sort of way in which we can combat the dangers of factionalization that George Washington warned us about in his farewell address. This is the duty, obligation, and above all responsibility that is expected of each and every one of us in our capacity as popular sovereigns of our republic. That is not an easy position to accept. I understand that. I also understand that it is not easy to stay involved and proactive as we must because of the overzealous regulations that have been foisted upon us by the out-of-control, illegitimate actions of the current federal government. The Barack Hussein Obama regime, however, has demonstrated that we must become vigilant and stalwart in our defense of the Constitution. If the parties and the current arena of American politics has proven unable, as it most certainly has in this election cycle, to stand up in defense of our Constitution, then that falls squarely upon our shoulders to bring a sense of sanity and intelligence and true objectivity back to the arena of American politics. The whole issue here is that we have a con artist who has pulled off the biggest con game in the history of the Republican Party. Folks, there really is no way around that. It is there, plain as day, for anyone who is gazing upon this in an objective fashion to see. It is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been warning about the detestable nature of Donald Trump. Again, we're called disloyal for this. Why is it that we're disloyal? Because our loyalty is to the very thing that our founding fathers demanded that our loyalty be to? That of the supreme law of the land, which is none other than the United States Constitution? I say that those who would support someone just because they have a particular letter after their name, be it an R, be it a D, be it an L, be it a C, that they are the ones who are not standing up for the Constitution. They are being blindly adherent to the very sort of factionalization that George Washington said could be the death of this country by the very sort of tyranny that it would unleash upon the Republic. Our founding fathers had brilliant foresight and insight into what would be happening. They understood that through the doctrine of entropy, or the phenomena of entropy, that we would see this government slide towards totalitarianism and corruption. That is where we find ourselves now, some 235 years after the inception of our country. Again, it is our duty and our obligation and our responsibility, and it is only our duty, obligation, and responsibility to save the country. We should stop seeking messianic figures and look within ourselves to find the strength of character that is necessary to bring this country back from the brink of ruination. That is the strength of the American people, because we have never backed down from any challenge or adversity that has been placed in our path. I think that Senator Sass was very correct in saying that we are America. If we are given an unacceptable choice, we reject it and select a better choice. That is the true strength of character and the foresight of the American people. It is why we have been an unshakable force of good all throughout our relatively brief yet illustrious history. But in order to fully embrace that, we must accept and recognize our true role as popular sovereigns. We must accept that our country is based on immutable tenets of natural law. Again, that's so difficult when we have a salivating mainstream media that is diametrically opposed to this notion, when we have the up-and-coming generation indoctrinated by those devious historical revisionists and Fabian socialists who are hell-bent on tearing this nation apart at the seams. But that means that we start first and foremost by expanding the knowledge of the Constitution. And we start off by standing up in solidarity and unity in defense of the Constitution. Because the Constitution belongs to each and every one of us in our role as individual popular sovereigns. It does not belong to anyone else. No one else can take that from us unless we allow them to. And that means that if we allow ourselves to be bullied into a tyranny of false unity, that we would be turning our backs onto those fundamental tenets that are a quintessential part of this true representative Republican form of government. As I've stated before, that is something we can ill afford, particularly when we consider that we are in the midst of this dangerous identity crisis coupled with a slew of constitutional crises that have only been accelerated and made worse by the Barack Hussein Obama regime. Expect to see a massive push now to further deteriorate our Constitution and our traditions, and institutions. We're already seeing it with the so-called gender-neutral bathroom issue. That is gripping the hearts and minds right now as even more diabolical and sinister plots are coming down the pike, as sure as ever to divide us and to attack all that we held near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It is a true diabolical plot and conspiracy, for lack of a better term here, folks, because what these forces are doing is the incessant march away from our Constitution. All of the problems that currently face our country are rooted in this very notion that it is at every level of government that we are seeing a further departure and divorcement from the clear and concise language and the natural law tenets that are an quintessential part of our Constitution. All we are asking for is a return to strict adherence to the Constitution and the enforcement of our laws. All we are asking for is that the United States of America remain a nation of laws and not of men. Yet Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton do not believe that. That is not what they advocate for, that is not what they believe, and that is certainly not how they would govern this country. That is why we find ourselves in the untenable situation that we currently find ourselves in. It is wholly unacceptable, and therefore we, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this republic, must come together, stand shoulder to shoulder, and outright reject these destructive choices for the highest office in the land. That is our commitment. That is the way we must be, and we must never turn our back on it, waver, capitulate, surrender, or collaborate with these forces that are all about the destruction of our traditional system of a free, open, and honest society and government. There can be no question that there has been a lot of betrayal throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, particularly with respect to the so-called conservative punditry and commensurate. I know that I mentioned in the last segment about Sean Hannity, but he's now trying to prod Trump to give any type of expansion as to whom he is considering for his team and cabinet, and states that he would essentially vote for him irrespective of what those results might be. And I've got a soundbite queued up for you to hear just exactly how this little exchange occurred.
Your Secretary of Homeland Security, maybe Defense Secretary, positions like that. And also, obviously, people are waiting for your decision as it relates to who your vice presidential nominee will be. Where are you in the process, both in terms of a team of rivals and selecting a VP?
Well, I'm in the process, and I have some people that I think are going to be fantastic for certain positions, and in my own mind, I already have them. I can't tell you who they are yet. It's just too soon. But I want to save a little bit of suspense for the convention. But I have some people that I've already, in my own mind, arrived, and I think they're going to be fantastic. And with the vice president, as you know, probably if you think about it, there are 10, and maybe you boil that down to 5. But some people that are really, really good, and we'll see what happens.
Any surprises?
Could be. Could be. If I could surprise you, I could surprise anybody.
I am not the corrupt press. I'm actually the conservative.
That's true, by the way. It happens. You happen to be right about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm an opinion show, and I don't hold back that I'll be voting for Donald Trump in November. All right. Here's what I think an important question. I have asked you.
So there we see it's a bunch of gravitas and grabas trying to play up to Trump, trying to get him to do anything, to agree to anything, but none of it is tied into what really matters. Again, this is the sort of thing that should be driving each and every one of us up the wall. Again, this is why it is so important to return to the Constitution. The Constitution is the key that will bring us back from the brink of ruin. But unfortunately, when we have the so-called conservative opinion pieces and the mouthpieces for conservatism, for lack of a better term here, with respect to Sean Hannity, groveling all over themselves, selling out their convictions and principles, it just tells me that we have been bamboozled by a bunch of charlatans for a great and lengthy period of time now, and it's unacceptable. Again, it seems as though these people are thinking only in terms of themselves. They're not focusing on what matters. They are forgetting that a representative republic must be greater than the sum of its parts. Again, this is something that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have lamented about oft-times on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. The more we think about the problems and the more we are faced with them, the more difficult it becomes to accept this sort of chicanery that has become a new norm in the American system of polity. It's disgusting because it works against all that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. I think the most startling aspect of it all, though, is that there is this lack of respect for the Constitution, when, in fact, that is the only thing that we are called to swear allegiance to. That is the only thing that demands our unwavering loyalty and respect. And I'm saddened to see that those who once proclaimed to be voices of conservatism would turn their back on that. Because, as we have also reiterated in the past, the only thing that unifies us both as a nation and as a people is the United States Constitution. It is that great social contract that defines what it is to be an American citizen. It mandates and outlines the proper scope and application of governmental power and authority. The entire federal government is supposed to be one of limited power. That is, it must trace any and all forms of righteous authority back to a power which is specifically enumerated unto it within the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the United States Constitution. That is the way that a representative Republican system of government based on the tenets of federalism and underpinned by the natural law tenets is supposed to operate. But we have so divorced ourselves from it that we have lost sight of what is important. That is why we see such troubling things as Glenn Beck's radio program being suspended on Sirius XM satellite radio due to a conversation that was taken out of context. In the United States, we used to be about enjoying and exercising our rights. We used to stand up for exercising those rights and not condemning people. There was this notion of a presumption of innocence until one is proved guilty. However, in the court of public opinion, we see that we have become wholly opposed to that. We have marched towards punishment first, questions later. But that does not reflect the true national character, heritage, spirit, and above all, identity of the American people. And again, this has been foisted upon us by those nefarious Fabian socialists who have been working out of every asset and ability of theirs to destroy this country. They are diametrically opposed to everything that is congruous and cohesive about this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Again, this is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, come to the microphone and explore this information and share this information with you. But on top of that, we seek to provide you with real-world practicable solutions because there are too many who just whine or complain about the problems. People like Sean Hannity and Michael Wiener Savage, who really don't care about preserving this nation, about preserving our fundamental and inalienable rights. And I think that that's due in no small part to a lack of understanding on how things work and how our system of government was designed to function. They are essentially acting in the capacity of intellectual lightweights who are frothing at the mouth to support and advance their own agenda. And that agenda is self-interest. It's not seeing that there's a greater good for the country. It's not seeing that there is a time when party allegiance and loyalty should take a backseat to the overarching natural law tenets that are a quintessential part of the nature of our nation. But that is what we at the Wright Flyer do. That is what I believe and advocate. That is what my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, believes and advocates. It's what our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, believes and advocates. We are strong advocates for the Constitution. We realize that the Constitution is the greatest document ever penned by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. It must be that which guides us and nothing else, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But now we find ourselves in an era of raw emotionalism. Raw emotionalism dictates everything, and that allows knee-jerk reactions in crises, to occur without any second thought, without any consideration of the unintended consequences that might result therefrom. It is a truly dangerous position to find ourselves in, both as a nation and as a people, because if things continue to go along the lines of the status quo, we will find that the death spiral of our republic will only accelerate, grow worse, and ultimately end in disaster. We could ill afford that right now. Our institutions and our history are in bad shape, and the reason they are in bad shape is that these Fabian socialists have incrementally been attacking them for well over a century and a half now. We have to alert ourselves to this reality, and we must be prepared to take action however we can to incrementally start pushing this whole system back towards the true tenets of the Constitution. That means we cannot expect to achieve instant gratification. Now, this will not occur overnight, even though it should, because we have truth, righteousness, and justice on our side. We must basically shake ourselves of any of these notions that we can easily overcome something that has been foisted upon us in such a long period of time off easily. It just will not happen in that manner or fashion. BizPac Review has put out a recent story that explores a bizarre phenomenon and development that is occurring within the 2016 presidential election cycle. It has now come forth that Kim Jong-un, the son of the late and really ridiculous communist leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-il, has basically come forth and given his endorsement to the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian Donald J. Trump. The little smally hand authoritarian has come forth and said that American voters should vote for Donald Trump in order to dull Hillary Clinton. Now, what does that mean if he finds it in his nature to go out and support a strong man like Donald Trump? It means that he is seeing certain qualities and characteristics within the man that are no different than his own. And it's no doubt or surprise that we have mentioned in a past episode of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that Donald Trump had praised Kim Jong-il for being able to unify the military forces of the Communist Party in his role as premier of the Communist Party in North Korea. That is stunning. It's just like how he came out in support of the Chinese response to the Tiananmen Square incident back in 1989. These strong authoritarian streaks should never be welcomed anywhere near the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It represents all that is wrong and dangerous, and it would certainly go against the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. Of course, these are the dangers that we have been warning about for 10 months straight at the very least. Folks, Donald J. Trump seems to reach out and support these dictators. He surrounds himself with yes-men, and he shows a complete and total inability for self-restraint. If we cannot have a true leader, then we best not support him. It comes to that sort of Hamilton rule. and warning that if you must have an enemy at the helm of government, let it be someone for whom you are wholly not responsible for and can resist with every fiber of your being. That is what we are committed to. That is what the hashtag Never Trump movement is committed to. If they need a reason as to why we must remain devout and steadfast and stalwart in our opposition to the mafioso quafioso, it is because the Constitution is superior to all. It is greater than the threat of a Supreme Court going left-wing for generations. It is greater than the threat of Hillary Clinton, and certainly with respect to foreign policy issues, when you see that the little dictator, Little Kim, is supporting Trump, that is all the more reason that we should take pause and evaluate it. However, I've noticed that a lot of Lion Trumpidians and latecomer supporters to Trump see this as an even greater reason to vote for the Quaff Waffler. Why? Why? Are they so blinded by their fear of Hillary and so blinded by their hatred for the entire body politic of the United States of America that they are willing to embrace the most ardent enemies of our country and to see that as a good reason to support someone? No, it's not a good reason to support someone. Now, sure, I'm sure that the Lion Trumpidians will go out of their way to try and rebut this by saying that it shows that they're actually afraid of Trump to make people do this. This is reverse psychology, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, right. Everything is reverse psychology, except that when you look at the true history, when you look at Donald's own deceitful statements made throughout his adult life, you can only come to one conclusion, and that is this, that he is at his heart a totalitarian, authoritarian, who will not govern within the confines of the proper scope and application of government as outlined and mandated by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Folks, there really is no way around that. It is a glaring, open, and obvious fact that he presents a clear and present danger to our representative Republican form of government. And the fact that the Lion Trumpidians choose to close their eyes to this and continue to attempt their bully pulpit tactics of trying to force us into a tyranny of false unity speaks volumes about what they really want, what they support. They don't care about freedom of conscience. They don't care about free will. And they don't care that the American people are supposed to, in their own right and capacity and abilities, be the supreme sovereigns in this country. That is a dark and twisted reality that we must face and address. And the way that we face and address it is that we never turn our backs on our principles. Again, this is why we have so oft times warned of the dangers of merely supporting someone out of blind party allegiance and loyalty. Again, it brings up that whole notion of how there used to be a so-called yellow dog Democrat in the Old South after the end of the Civil War. And where that comes from is this whole notion that they would vote Democrat even if the Democrats put up a yellow dog to run against the Republican nominee. That is a twisted mentality. It was wrong to be a yellow dog Republican. But that's what we're seeing right now, unfurling before our very eyes in this 2016 presidential election cycle. We are seeing yellow dog Republicans pushing for a tyranny of false unity. And for what purpose? Because they believe the fear-mongering that's being foisted upon them by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media? Because they want to believe that Trump is not as bad as he really is? Folks, don't deceive yourselves. Use your faculties. Use your abilities to think for yourself. Vet the candidate, and if the candidate is opposed to the Constitution, oppose the candidate, irrespective of what party that candidate belongs to. That is what our founding fathers would have expected of us. That is what we must do in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. There really is no way around this, because it is a non-delegable authority. It is non-negotiable. But again, with Trump, everything is negotiable. Everything is about him and his will, and he will go and whittle away our rights to try and appease himself, and to give this appearance of the legacy that he is the greatly, wonderfully, mafioso, quaff waffler that has all the answers at his disposal. Remember, he even went to social media and on Twitter and tried to say that ISIS is a bad thing and only he can stop them. How? How is he going to stop them? By what he suggested doing with North Korea, going down and having conversations with them? You don't negotiate with those who are terrorists. You don't negotiate with those whose whole objective and mission in life is to destroy the United States of America and our republic. But that's exactly what he is calling upon us to do. That is exactly the position that he has assumed upon himself. But folks, if that sounds a lot like the Fabian socialist positions, it is because it is. It is an act of weakness through the twisted and diabolical doctrine of moral relativism that should have no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. But Trump doesn't think about things in that way. Remember that when he was on Megyn Kelly's program, he said that if he lost the presidency, it wouldn't be that it would be a travesty for the American people that someone as destructive as Hillary Rotten Clinton would be wielding the reins of political power in our republic. It's that it would be a colossal waste of time and money for himself. Again, why is everything about him always just about himself? Why does he not see the bigger picture? It's because he doesn't care to. He has been a spoiled brat for his entire 70 years on this planet, and that is all he cares about. His own self-aggrandizement, his own self-enrichment. Screw the country. Screw the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. They are just pawns on his checkered board because, as he mentioned in his book, The Art of the Steal, or The Art of the Squeal, that it was all about being different, going away from chess players. We don't need them anymore. Why? That means that you are placing yourself in a wholly untenable situation when it comes to foreign policy, diplomacy, and actions. It shows that you will be a weak and feckless leader and commander-in-chief. Again, this is one of the vast array of reasons that we have been warning about Donald Trump here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, for these past 10.5 months straight now. But of course, the Lion Trumpidians are not going to adhere to this. They're not going to open their eyes to it. They simply do not care. That, too, plays into the hands of the nefarious forces that are doing everything in their power to tear this country apart at the seams. They are acting upon their twisted machinations, and they think they see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that is their sign of victory. But let's be the light at the end of the tunnel, the light of liberty, that unshakable, immutable force that cannot be moved, that true, inconquerable spirit, indomitable spirit of the American people that has vanquished every threat that has ever arisen to our representative, constitutionally endowed Republican system of government. That is what we are called upon to do in our capacity as popular sovereigns. We understand the great magnitude of the dangers and threats which are facing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. We understand that it is our duty, our obligation, and above all, our responsibility to stand shoulder to shoulder in staunch resistance to these nefarious forces who are hell-bent on our utter annihilation. Again, when Trump said that it is the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, and that he does not seek nor desire full unity within the party, that shows that he is acting in a way that is selfish, self-interested, and destructive. That is something we can ill afford right now, particularly when you remember and recall just how precarious of a position we are in with respect to our institutions, our traditions, our history, and the safeguards and safety valves that were placed into our constitutionally endowed form of government by our founding fathers. They had the great foresight to warn us about the sort of charlatans and the type of chicanery that is currently plaguing this nation. They told us to avoid it. They told us to be proactive in our defense of the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. And that is what we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, are dedicated to. We will not turn our backs on the most important, quintessential aspects that make us a great nation. You see, the empty, shallow, hollow, and meaningless platitudes put forth by Trump in his campaign slogan of Make America Great Again really hang and ring empty because, first of all, America never stopped being great. We are still great as long as the Constitution is still there. As long as we, the people, continue to adhere to it and continue to fight for it, we will never cease to be great. But then again, let's just say for argument's sake that he wants to make America great. Well, how? If you don't understand what made America great in the first place, how will you be able to make America great? Because, as we have stated before, the only way to make America great is to adhere to the Constitution, to further empower and embolden the American people to enjoy and exercise their fundamental and inalienable rights without the fear of the government hand coming down upon us, smashing us with repercussions and governmental tyranny. But that is not what we are hearing from Donald Trump. We know that Donald Trump has never fully read the Constitution because, by his own admission, he claimed to have found no value in that sacred document whatsoever. Again, how can we expect him to take the oath of office, which is all about upholding, promoting, and defending the Constitution, if, by his own admission, he found no value in it? That is a dangerous proposition. That is a dangerous condition and set of circumstances that we can ill afford to allow to come to fruition in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It presents that great challenge that is wholly unacceptable. Again, this is why it is more important now than ever that the hashtag #NeverTrump movement remain galvanized, that we stay unified, that we do not turn our backs onto our principles, and that we do not sell out that cherished liberty that is a quintessential part of our national heritage. You see, again, it comes back to the very notion that sacred honor means something in this nation. It meant something when our founding fathers risked everything to sign the Declaration of Independence and later to draft and ratify the Constitution of the United States of America. They were committed to the idea of independence. They were committed to the idea of liberty, and they were willing to stand up against the most powerful, well-organized military force known to man at that time, the Crown of the British Empire. That takes great courage. That means that they were willing to lose everything. Well, that's where we must be. Let them attempt to chastise us. Let them attempt to tell us that we're moronic or that we're wrong for staying steadfast to our heartfelt beliefs. In the end, they are the charlatans. In the end, it is they who are the agent provocateurs of tyranny, despotism, and the death and destruction of our representative Republican form of government. This is the truth that we proclaim here at the Wright Flyer. This is also why we state that we are the new voice of freedom, that we are the new resistance, that the constitutional compositionist movement is just now getting started. And with your help, we can return sanity to this country. We can stand in fierce opposition to any and all of those nefarious forces that would do everything in their power to pit us against ourselves and to make us subjected to a governmental form of bondage and tyranny which has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. This is our calling. This is what our founding fathers expected of us when they said that this system of government that they gave us was one in which was to be handed down to posterity. I'm reminded of the very famous words of Benjamin Franklin when he answered the question of a young lady who approached him after the Constitutional Convention, and she said, "Mr. Franklin, what have you given us?" He turned to her and he said, "We have given you a republic if you can keep it." You see, that last conditional part of the phrase is the key. here. They gave us a representative Republican form of government that fully acknowledged our fundamental and inalienable rights. But it is our duty, our obligation, our responsibility to proactively maintain and safeguard that Republican form of government. This is why the disastrous and twisted game of semantics played by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media is so dangerous and so intellectually disingenuous. It's because it goes against the very heart of the notion of what we are. To loosely use the phrase of democracy, as it has been all throughout the last 150 years, is all foisted upon us for the undeniable purpose of attempting to redefine the proper scope and application of government in this country. A democracy only recognizes the rights of the majority, whereas a representative republic recognizes the true rights of the individual sovereigns, and it is designed to protect those rights from both a tyranny of the majority and a tyranny of the minority. But what we see unfurling in current events in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours is a direct assault on that type of government, is a direct assault on our freedoms and liberties and our abilities to think and act for ourselves as is intended in our capacity as true, ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this republic. Again, it requires that we go back to the Constitution, that we spread knowledge with respect to the Constitution itself, and that we never veer away from that, because that is the quintessential heart, nature, characteristics, and identity of us as both a nation and a people. Again, we will never turn our back on that. It is far too important. There is far too much at risk to simply give up now, to bow down and capitulate to those nefarious forces who would strip and deprive us of all that we hold near and dear in this republic of ours. That is an oath of solemn commitment. It is standing up to and for our sacred honor. Because if we lose our rights and we lose our sacred honor, we have lost everything, and we cannot allow or afford to have that happen. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. She is not engaging in legal deception like Donald Trump, but she will pour you that last round of alcohol. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have either here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX, and there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot page, which includes audio blogs that also won't use legal shenanigans to deceive you, and our Cafe Press account, which includes all sorts of goodies and trinkets with our logo and first-class passenger logo, including drinking glasses, tote bags, clothing, hats, apparel, shoes, iPad, iPhone, Android phone, and Android tablet covers and protectors. There's so much there, folks, at reasonable prices. Take a look. I'm sure you'll find something that works for you. Give us a little bit of support so we can continue to provide you with this indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, as we always do, as we take off over, the friendly airwaves. I guess we could take them over too. As always, folks, thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. We'll see you next time. Do take care.